There I am, playing the new Metroid Dread video game, when my girlfriend at the time walks in and exclaims, "Is that Barbie? Are you playing as her?" At that moment, a part of me died, not because she was wrong, but because this was the scene she walked in on. All she saw were Samus's eyes. The blonde hair, blue irises were bathed in green beneath her helmet. She in fact had no clue just how right she was. As a Metroid fan of over 2 decades, I can simultaneously be fine with the Samus design we've had for decades, and have the artist side of my brain want to do a redesign as a fun exercise. And before any of you nerds call me a fake fan, tell me, do you own the original Metroid for the Famicom Disk System? I still have my original Game Boy Advance with my legit copy of Fusion, as well as the box and instructions. I'm so based, I have 2 unopened copies of Other M. Anyway, this is just for fun. Regardless of what transpired that fateful day, I myself have always had reservations about Samus's design, so we're going to keep our objective goals simple in order to identify what is good and bad for the character, design-wise, which, reminder, is subjective. There's no such thing as an objectively good character design. It always comes with one's own, design opinions inherently attached, just like my Halo video. I will lay out my reasoning for each deviation and then try and execute on it. Now, our main criticism here is that Samus's design doesn't inherently reflect her written or visual story well enough. I can't tell that she has anything to do with this environment just by looking at her. And so, you might say, well, just because someone is born into an environment in real life, it doesn't mean they always end up looking like it. And I'd reply, yes, agreed. But that's the design part about creating fictional worlds. You get to make the design of the character reflect their environment, so that players in a gameplay setting get a sense for the character just by looking at them. You can always intentionally subvert expectations as well, but I digress. Samus just looks like a random American Barbie girl in space, which I'll repeat one more time, that's fine if you like it, I'm fine with it, but for the sake of this exercise, let's see if we can't create more visual parallels between her background and her design. So, what is her background? Let's start with who raised her and what they look like. After losing her parents, she was adopted by the Chozo, an alien race who infused her with their DNA and was raised and trained by them on their home planet. Metroid Prime 1 is probably the game that most Metroid fans are familiar with and very nostalgic for me as well. So I will primarily be calling back to that game's concept art for the Chozo, as well as the color palettes of their environments. The Chozo are an ancient bird-like race whose design influence is like a mix between Native American tribes and ancient Egyptians. So we want to call back to that native and bird-like influence. I also like the idea of giving her war paint, since the Chozo trained Samus to be a warrior. Originally, I'd place it on the top half of her face, but then I realized I was just making that one fair skin from Overwatch and had to catch myself. Side note, if you're an artist, sometimes these things happen, right? A situation where I played a game a decade ago, and that design suddenly manifested itself here. Especially because Fair's design was influenced by Samus, so in turn, it came out in this redesign. Plus, focusing on the Chozo native influence, it's no wonder my brain pulled this from its subconscious. Even while I haven't played the game in years, it suddenly hit me and I had to do some searching before I realized where I was pulling this design from. And when we catch ourselves, we can acknowledge it and then try and pivot the design to move on. And since Fair's Thunderbird skin is explicitly calling out to native culture,
so clearly this is not offensive. It is offensive. I am very sorry.
And our focus is on the fictional Chozo race, I then took the idea of the war paint but flipped the design and changed the color to yellow. This calls back to the beaks of the Chozo much better. It also calls back to how we can see that Samus has a breathing apparatus on the interior of her helmet that would approximately cover the same area of her face. I wanted to keep Samus's iconic stray bangs that frame her face as well. I played around with it being jewelry or literally grouped feathers, but eventually went back to my initial idea of the front bangs of her hair kind of dropping down, kind of like the Major, and then having some stray strands feathering out a bit, being reminiscent of Chozo feathers, but not literal feathers. Next, what is her job? What is she doing in the games and why is she going on her missions? What are her gameplay mechanics that can inform us of her character? She's a bounty hunter by trade, who at times needs to infiltrate and be stealthy and needs to have a high level of physicality. What sort of physicality might you ask? Well, I'd say her movement is most often in line with that of a gymnast. As she's constantly somersaulting through the air, she needs to be able to perform well-executed tucks and even contort herself into a ball. So, we'll give her a smaller frame and not have her be massively broad-shouldered or be too tall. Many people conflate her with Doom Marine and the Master Chief, who are both super soldiers, and while she did train with and sometimes work for the Galactic Federation, she's more of the lone wolf bounty hunter type. So for me, I would more so run with a stealthy gymnast approach and reduce her height, as most gymnasts are quite compact. Additionally, they often have thick, well-developed legs. Samus is backtracking and running and jumping and spinning everywhere, so I think this totally works. She's also always holding up that arm cannon of hers and clambering around, so I gave her well-defined delts and arms as well, because I don't know if you ever tried a front delt raise more than like 25 pounds for more than a minute, but it'll blow those shoulders up in no time. I even adjusted her traps because you'll notice the different shape they take whenever they're built with more muscle. I rarely draw anatomy as I almost exclusively paint backgrounds, aside from some pin sketching, so bear with me as I hope I did a decent job of selecting which muscles to render while trying to keep the line work minimal. I started off jotting down something rough in my sketchbook, then took a photo of that and did the rest on my iPad in Procreate. I originally wanted to keep the colors flat, but decided to do some quick rendering to enhance my color choice. Speaking of color, let's refer back to our Chozo reference and examine their color palettes and see if we can't make heads or tails of what would make sense for Samus. The Chozo people and environment are dominated by that 6th generation of console shooter type of color palette with lots of browns and desaturated greens, with some pops of red and hints of orange. Originally, I had her suit be brown, but I realized that would make her look almost naked, as I chose a darker skin tone to reflect the fact that she'd be training outside all day in the sun, and again, I want to match that brown Chozo feather look. So I first tried desaturating the browns to get a grayish blue for the base of the suit, reminiscent of the Chozo armor. That's when I decided to add more rendering to get some of those reflected flecks of orange texture. And it works well enough because the actual Zero suit is blue. But I finally settled on this orange, which calls back to one of her alt designs that you'd see on the end screen in Fusion. I changed her tech fabric lines to be blue because they were getting lost, and they now kind of complement that orange base, while keeping the deep reddish secondary patches on the suit. However, those tech lines are not glowing sci-fi LED lines, because this Zero suit is meant for stealth, and if rendered in a 3D game, I'd choose to tone down the blue even more. I went with brown, orange, and gray blues to enhance her alleged stealth and infiltration abilities, because I in fact laughed the first time I played Zero Mission Stealth section. I'll never forget playing it for the first time, and that game tells me your gun can only stun and that stealth is your only option. Cut to Samus with her bright crayon spaghetti hair and a bright blue suit screaming shoot me as she garishly stood out from her surroundings. Like, come on Samus, Naked Snake has more camo going on than you. And finally, I stuck with her one little pink Chozo patch from her actual design, but I changed it to green to mirror her helmet's visor color. And now, having the base suit be orange, it echoes her cybernetic suit better. I went with yellow eyes to mimic the Chozo Quiet Beak from Dread. Additionally, that color can be found on her Various suit as well. I feel like a yellow iris color would also be a very alien trait for a human to possess, so it's a subtler nod to her being infused with their DNA. If you want to see more of a character like this, I'm working on a manga that will be entirely hand-drawn, featuring a character quite similar to this, so please consider joining the Patreon, or just liking and subscribing, or dislike it if you didn't enjoy this design exercise. In the meantime, I've done a Halo CE painting in the same vein as this video, where I go into its design influence, which you can watch here, or go watch my Bloodborne trailer if you haven't already. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Subulba.